Turn the car around immediately." The words burst out of me with such urgency that my husband almost lost control on the highway. We were somewhere in upstate New York, probably an hour from the Canadian border, when a gut instinct hit me like a lightning bolt. Something was terribly wrong. "Ruth, what's going on?" my husband asked, easing the SUV onto the shoulder as cars whizzed past. My hands trembled as I stared at the seemingly harmless overnight bag sitting in our back seat. Just minutes earlier, my son Brandon had called me. His voice had an unusual sweetness, asking specifically about that bag. He even said, "I love you," before hanging up. In 42 years, that boy had barely spoken those words to me, and never during a casual phone call. "Something isn't right," I whispered, my chest tightening. "We need to turn back right now." My husband looked at me with the same trust he'd shown throughout our 50 years together. He asked no questions, offered no objections. He simply waited for a safe moment in traffic and executed a U-turn, a move that likely saved our lives. What I found in that bag would upend everything I believed about my son and the family I had devoted years to supporting. What they were capable of, what they were willing to risk, all to fix their own financial issues. It was shocking, unimaginable, and even months later, I struggled to comprehend that my own child could place me in such danger. But I'm jumping ahead to explain how we ended up on that highway with me shouting for a U-turn. I need to go back 5 years. 5 years of giving, sacrificing, and loving, all of which my son's family took for granted. I had been their financial lifeline ever since Brandon lost his job. Month after month, year after year, I was their safety net, the one who rescued them from every emergency. And they repaid my generosity with a scheme so appalling, so criminal, it could have ruined my life. Let me start at the beginning so you can understand why those words to turn the car around were the most vital I've ever spoken. My name is Ruth Henderson. I'm 68 and live with my husband of 50 years in our snug 3-bedroom home in Albany, New York. We raised 3 children here, and after decades as a school secretary, I retired with a modest pension and some savings we had carefully built up over time. Life was good, calm, until 5 years ago, when everything shifted for Brandon's family. Brandon had been a warehouse supervisor for nearly 15 years when the company downsized without warning. At 42, he suddenly found himself unemployed, with a wife, Amber, and a 3-year-old son to care for. The job market was brutal. Even when he found work, it was only temporary positions paying far less than he'd earned. As his mother, I couldn't just watch them struggle. It started small, sending a few $100s here and there for groceries or gas so Brandon could keep job hunting. Then the landlord raised the rent. Before I knew it, I was covering most of their monthly expenses: rent, car payments, insurance, utilities. I bought groceries, paid for daycare, all so Amber could keep her part-time job at a nail salon. "Mom, this is only temporary," Brandon would promise whenever I handed him another check. "As soon as I get back on my feet, I'll repay every penny." Amber would nod, though I noticed she rarely seemed as appreciative as Brandon. Sometimes, I caught her rolling her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking, or making subtle remarks about how others had it easier. I ignored it because family helps family, right? And oh, how I adored my grandson. I babysat nearly every weekend, took him to the park, read to him, spoiled him in the way grandmothers are meant to. Those moments made every sacrifice feel worth it. My husband occasionally worried we were giving too much. "Ruth, honey, we need to think about our retirement," he'd say gently, but I couldn't bear the thought of my grandson missing out. Over the years, Brandon found jobs, lost jobs, found others that didn't pay enough. I kept writing checks, kept covering shortfalls, kept being the constant support they relied on. By the time my grandson started school, I realized I had been sustaining them for almost 5 consecutive years. Not occasionally, not in emergencies, but consistently, month after month. They never had to worry about money because Grandma Ruth was always there to fill the gaps. I thought I was being a devoted mother and grandmother, helping them until they could stand independently. What I didn't see was that my giving had stopped feeling like a gift and had started feeling like an expectation. They had grown so accustomed to my support that they began planning around it, assuming my money was theirs. And when I finally, for the first time in 5 years, said no to one of their requests, that's when I discovered how little they truly valued me beyond my bank account. Last January, everything shifted with one phone call. My grandson had been at the local public elementary school and, by all accounts, was doing fine academically. But Amber painted a different story over the phone. "Ruth, he's being bullied constantly," she said with exaggerated concern. "The other kids are cruel, mocking his clothes, leaving him out. Teachers don't care. Classes are huge. He comes home crying almost every day. My heart ached for my grandson. What grandmother wouldn't feel devastated hearing her child was suffering?" "There's a private academy across town," Brandon chimed in. "Small classes, strict anti-bullying policies, individual attention. It would solve everything." "That sounds perfect," I said, picturing my grandson thriving. "What do you need me to do?" Amber's voice softened. "The tuition is steep. 15,000 for the rest of this term, then 18,000 annually." My stomach sank. These numbers were far higher than anything they'd ever requested. But then I thought of my grandson's tearful little face, and I almost said yes immediately. "Almost. Let me think about it," I heard myself say. "This is more than our usual support." Silence followed. I could practically sense their shock. "Mom," Brandon said slowly, "this is about our boy's happiness and future. Surely that's worth any cost." For 3 days, I wrestled with the decision. My husband and I scrutinized our budget, our retirement, our financial security. We could afford it, but it would require major adjustments. Something else nagged at me, too. In all the time I'd spent with my grandson recently, he seemed happy, chatty about friends, excited about school, never mentioning bullying. When I gently asked, he just shrugged and said everything was fine before returning to play. Finally, I called back. "I've thought this through," I said to Brandon and Amber. "I love our boy more than anything, but we should explore other options first. Maybe talk to his teachers, look into the school's anti-bullying programs, or consider a different public school before jumping to private education." The silence that followed was freezing. "So you're saying no?" Amber said flatly. "I'm saying let's consider other solutions first," I replied calmly. "Unbelievable," I heard her mutter to Brandon, clearly expecting me to hear. "Some grandmother." The call ended, leaving me with promises to explore other options they clearly had no intention of pursuing. Within a week, everything changed. My weekend babysitting sessions disappeared. "We're busy this weekend" became the standard reply. Family dinners vanished from conversation. Even casual calls with my grandson became rushed and awkward. At the grocery store one afternoon, my grandson ran to hug me with joy. Amber immediately called him back sharply. "Come on, we need to go," barely acknowledging me. I could see the confusion in my grandson's innocent face. He didn't understand why Grandma Ruth suddenly wasn't welcome. For the first time in decades, setting one boundary, asking for a pause to consider alternatives, provoked this reaction. The message was unmistakable. My value was purely financial. 2 months passed like this. I missed my grandson terribly, questioned myself, and even considered paying the tuition just to restore my family's affection. That's exactly when they called with a sudden change of heart and an invitation that would lead us to that highway in upstate New York. Looking back, I realized those 2 cold months weren't punishment, they were preparation for something far worse. Then, as suddenly as it began, the freeze ended. It was early April when my phone rang. Brandon's voice sounded unusually cheerful. "Hey, Mom, how are you and Dad doing?" he asked, excitement evident. After 2 months of barely speaking, this shift felt almost shocking. "We're fine," I said cautiously. "How is everyone there?" "Great. Actually, that's why I'm calling. Amber and I thought maybe we've been too stressed lately. We'd like to spend a weekend together at Amber's cousin's cabin in Quebec. You, Dad, me, Amber, and our boy. What do you think?" My heart soared. Despite everything, I'd miss them terribly, especially my grandson. "That sounds wonderful," I replied. "When were you thinking?" "This weekend," Brandon said. "Short notice, but the weather's perfect, and the cabin had a cancellation. It'd be great for our boy to reconnect with his grandparents and for all of us to spend time together. We plan to drive up with our SUV. Brandon mentioned bringing fishing gear and games for our grandson. "Oh, and Mom," he added, "could you carry one extra bag? Our car is packed tight with kids' stuff and fishing equipment." "Just a small overnight bag, of course," I said without hesitation. What grandmother wouldn't help carry a bag? The night before the trip, Amber dropped off the bag. It was a simple black overnight bag. She was cheerful, chatting about my grandson's excitement for the trip and thanking us for helping with transportation. "This trip is going to be great for all of us," she said with a seemingly genuine smile. I went to bed that night feeling hopeful for the first time in months. The next morning, we took to cars, my husband and I in the SUV with the bag and some gear, Brandon following with Amber and our grandson. The drive started perfectly. Our grandson waved from their car, showing us his travel games at red lights. It felt like old times, like we were a family again. After about 3 hours, heading toward the Canadian border, my phone rang. It was Brandon from the car behind us. "Mom, quick question," he said, and something in his tone immediately set off alarm bells. There was a nervousness I had never heard before. "Yeah, honey, that bag Amber gave you, you've got it with you, right?" "It made it into the car," I replied. "Yes, of course. It's right here beside me." "Good, good. And you haven't, I mean, you didn't need to move anything around in it, or anything, right?" The question was strange. Why would I be rifling through their personal bag? "No, sweetheart. I haven't touched it." "Why, oh, no reason. Just making sure everything's secure for the border crossing. You know how careful they are these days." Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "I love you, Mom. You know that, right? I really, really love you." My son had never, in all his adult life, called me just to say he loved me. Never, and never with that intensity, that desperate tone. I hung up, hands trembling. Every maternal instinct I'd developed over nearly 7 decades screamed that something was horribly wrong. Asterisk, asterisk, turn the car around. Now, asterisk, asterisk. Those words left my mouth with a force that probably saved both our lives. We pulled over at the next exit. While my husband kept watch and distracted, I quietly opened that seemingly innocent overnight bag. What I found made my blood run cold. Hidden beneath my grandson's folded pajamas and some of his toys were small packages wrapped in plastic. Even at my age, I knew exactly what I was looking at. Drugs, a significant amount of them. My own son and his wife had planned to use me as an unwitting drug mule across an international border. They had counted on my love for my grandson, my desire to reconnect with family, and my complete trust to carry their illegal cargo without question. If we had been caught at the border, and with the way inspections were happening that day, we very well might have been I would have been facing criminal charges. At 68, I could have been looking at years in prison for drug trafficking. Brandon's phone call wasn't just about checking the bag. It was him emotionally unraveling because he knew he was about to destroy his mother's life to solve his own problems. The entire reunion trip, the sudden thaw after 2 months of cold treatment, the urgency. The cousins' cabin had been meticulously orchestrated to manipulate my love for them into committing a federal crime. As I stared at those packages tucked among my grandson's innocent belongings, I realized my child was willing to sacrifice everything, my freedom, my reputation, my future, rather than handle his financial troubles legally. In that moment, the Ruth who had spent 5 years enabling and supporting them vanished. Standing on that highway shoulder, I felt a permanent shift inside me. The grandmother who had once prioritized peace over her own safety was gone. My husband walked over quietly. "What did you find, honey?" I showed him the contents without a word. His face turned white, then hardened with an anger I had rarely seen in our 50 years of marriage. "We're going home," he said simply. "Right now." From their car behind us, I could see Brandon growing agitated, probably wondering why we had stopped. My phone rang again, but I turned it off. I couldn't bear to hear his voice, knowing what he'd planned. The drive back to Albany was quiet, but my mind raced. Every cold shoulder, every missed weekend, every delayed dinner suddenly made sense. They hadn't punished me after I refused the tuition. They had prepared me, made me unsuspecting so that when they invited me on this trip, I wouldn't question a thing. They had manipulated my love, my desperation to reconnect, and my trust to nearly destroy my life. When we pulled into their driveway, Brandon and Amber were already out of their car, looking confused and panicked. "Mom, what's going on?" My son called as I approached with the bag. Why did we turn around? We were almost there. I set the bag down on their doorstep and looked at my son. Really looked at him. When had he become someone I didn't recognize? When had his struggles turned him into someone willing to put his mother behind bars to solve his own problems? "I know what's in the bag," I said quietly. Color drained from both their faces. Amber grabbed Brandon's arm, exchanging frantic glances. "Mom, I can explain," Brandon started. "No," I cut him off, voice steady despite trembling hands. "There's nothing to explain. You planned to use me to commit a federal crime. You were willing to let me face prison time to solve your financial problems. It wasn't like that," Amber burst out. "We were desperate. We owe people significant amounts, and they were threatening us. We thought if we could just make one trip. You thought you could sacrifice me instead of dealing with your own choices. I finished for her. My grandson stood behind them, confused and scared by the strange behavior of his parents. My heart broke for him. I want you to listen very carefully, I said, voice growing stronger. I will no longer provide any financial assistance. No rent help, no car payments, no groceries, no emergency funds, nothing. Mom, you can't be serious, Brandon said, desperation creeping into his voice. We depend on that support. We can't survive without it. Then you'll need to figure out how to survive, I replied, the same way millions of other adults do, without putting their mothers at risk of federal charges. I turned to walk back to our car, but Brandon grabbed my arm. Please, just think about this. We made a mistake, but if you cut us off now, we'll lose everything. The house, the cars, everything. I gently pulled free and looked at him one last time. You were willing to let me lose everything. My freedom, my reputation, my future. Now you'll face the consequences of your choices. As we drove away, I saw them in the rearview mirror, standing on the driveway, holding that bag, finally realizing their safety net was gone forever. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and made a list of every automatic payment, every check, every form of assistance I had been providing. The total was staggering. I had been subsidizing their entire lifestyle for so long that I had forgotten what our own budget looked like without those expenses. Within a week, I canceled everything. Bank accounts they could access, the credit card for groceries, automatic car insurance payments gone. I also called a lawyer, explained everything, and asked for legal guidance to protect myself. He was horrified and helped me document everything in case they ever claimed I was complicit. For the first time in decades, I put my own safety and well-being ahead of my son's convenience. It should have felt selfish. Instead, it felt like the most responsible thing I had ever done. By enabling them for so long, I hadn't helped them. I had prevented them from learning to manage, to live within their means, to make adult decisions. Now, finally, they would have to. 4 weeks after I cut them off, reality hit hard. My phone started ringing constantly. First it was Brandon, then Amber, and sometimes even calls from my grandson's phone, trying to guilt me into picking up. I let every call go to voicemail. The messages started angry. Mom, our credit cards are being declined everywhere. You can't just abandon us like this. Then they turned desperate. Please, we're about to lose the house. Just help us one more time, and we'll figure something else out. I had heard those promises for decades. This time, I stayed firm. Then came a call from Amber's sister, someone I barely knew. Ruth, I think you should know, she said quietly. Amber and Brandon are planning to try that Canada trip again. But this time, they plan to go themselves. I'm worried they'll do something reckless. My blood ran cold. Even after everything, they were still scheming to traffic drugs rather than deal with their debt legally. When I asked about this weekend, they wanted me to watch my grandson, claiming a business trip. I immediately called my lawyer. He advised contacting the authorities, but I couldn't take that risk after what they had already tried to do to me. That Saturday morning, I was drinking coffee in my kitchen when the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Is this Ruth Henderson? A woman asked. Yes, this is Officer Martinez with U.S. Border Patrol. Your son Brandon Henderson and daughter-in-law Amber Henderson were arrested early this morning attempting to cross into Canada with illegal substances. They listed you as their emergency contact. My hands shook, but not from shock. I had expected this call. Where is their son? I managed to ask. He's currently with a family member, but Child Protective Services needs to arrange proper placement since you're listed as next of kin. Within hours, I was filling out emergency custody paperwork. That afternoon, my grandson came home with me, carrying a small suitcase and his favorite stuffed animal, Grandma Ruth. He asked that first night as I tucked him into the guest room that would now be his. When are Mom and Dad coming back? How do you explain to an 8-year-old that his parents chose to risk everything, including him, rather than live responsibly? They made some bad choices, sweetheart, I said gently. But you're safe here with Grandpa and me, and we're going to take very good care of you. Over the following months, the legal process unfolded exactly as I had expected. Brandon and Amber were sentenced to 18 months in federal prison. The house they couldn't afford without my help went into foreclosure. Their cars were repossessed, but I felt no satisfaction in their downfall. Only sadness and relief that my grandson was safe. The custody hearing was surprisingly straightforward. Brandon and Amber, facing serious prison time, agreed to temporary custody to me rather than risk their son entering foster care. My lawyer helped establish a clear arrangement that protected everyone's interests. My grandson started at a new school near our home, the same excellent public school where I had once worked. The teachers remembered me fondly and helped him adjust. No expensive private academy was needed, just caring adults and a stable environment. In the evenings, he did homework at my kitchen table while I prepared dinner. My husband taught him chess and helped with math. We read stories together each night, the same way I had with Brandon when he was little. Slowly, my grandson's confusion faded and was replaced by a sense of security he had never really had. No more parents fighting over finances. No more uncertainty about bills. No more desperate decisions putting everyone at risk. Grandma, he said about 6 months after moving in, I like it here. It's quiet. That's when I realized what we had all been missing. Peace. Simple, ordinary peace that comes from living within your means, making responsible choices, and putting a child's well-being first. As for Brandon and Amber, they write occasionally from prison. Brandon's letters are full of apologies and promises to do better. Amber's are mostly complaints about prison conditions and reminders that I owe them for their troubles. I don't respond to either of them. My lawyer advised that when they're released, they may try to regain custody of their son. We're already preparing for that legal battle, documenting the stable home and educational progress my grandson has made. For now, our days are filled with school projects, weekend fishing trips with my husband, and quiet evenings reading together on the couch. My grandson is thriving in ways I never saw when he was caught in the chaos of his parents' irresponsibility. And me, I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior, even when it's coming from your own child. I'm 73 now, and I don't know how many decades I have left. But I do know I will spend whatever time I have raising my grandson to be someone who solves problems honestly, treats people with respect, and never asks someone else to pay for his mistakes. That's my story. That's how a grandmother's protective instincts and willingness to set boundaries saved not just her own life, but gave her grandson the stable childhood his parents couldn't provide. Sometimes the most powerful words you can say to someone who takes advantage of your generosity aren't, "I'll help you one more time." Sometimes it's, "I love you too much to keep enabling you." And sometimes, that's exactly what the next generation needs to hear. That's my story. I'd love to hear what you think. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who were taking advantage of your generosity? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe for more stories like mine.